My family went through a really hard time. We were homeless for about 3 months, and we were living in our car.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another Stories with Richi, and today we have our special guest, Grace Maiden.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Welcome, and I gotta say right away, you guys see the poster back there? Hope, we have the designer right here of our poster, and thank you so much for that.
Yeah, no, of course. It was definitely like a stretch. I'm not like a big digital artist, but I like being stretched to do different things. And I just remember hearing you talk about like your idea for this podcast and like this ministry, and it was so cool just to like see it come to life and turn into t-shirts and sweatshirts and stuff like that. Yeah, it was so cool.
It's awesome. Well, tell us more about yourself.
Yeah.
Who is Grace Maiden?
Yeah, so I am a Corbin student. I'm a senior at Corbin. I am studying trauma and addictions in Christian ministry. Yeah, I should be graduating in May, hopefully, knock on wood. But yeah, I do a lot of art. I am from Sisters, Oregon originally, but I moved to Salem to come to school. But yeah, I do a lot of art on the side. I have an account, follow it. It's called Be Still Art. Yeah, I do custom paintings, murals, and originals. I like to do it usually in oil or acrylic, but yeah, art is just like a really big part of my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
I remember, shout out to Ayumi. It was a friend that introduced us, and ever since we've been able to have a friendship. Well, art. Let's go back to Grace Maiden. When did you start? When did you start making art?
I think I mean, as a kid, like growing up, I would do like the finger paintings, and they weren't good or anything. Yeah, but I want to say I started doing art when I was like 9 years old. When I was 9, my family went through a really hard time. We were homeless for about 3 months, and we were living in our car.
Wow.
And yeah, while we were living in our car, to kind of make the time go by, I would either play outside, listen to the radio, or I would draw or do art, which was really cool. I wasn't very good, but it's something that helped the time go by.
What happened during that time?
Yeah, so it was in 2008. The economy had collapsed. There was a housing crisis. And my parents, they worked in real estate. They like made houses and stuff. But yeah, then the housing market crashed and they both lost their jobs. My dad ended up leaving. He had a mental break and just kind of took off. And then my mom was a single mom with 4 kids. Yeah, and she got laid off from her other job that she had to support us because they couldn't afford to pay her. Yeah, and then we were living in our car for a while.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was a crazy time. I mean, as a kid, I never really fully processed what it was. The way that we phrased it was like we're camping, just to kind of make it lighthearted. But yeah, it was during the summer, so I guess like if there's a good time to be outside as a kid, it's during the summer. But yeah, I mean, it was a crazy time, but through that homelessness, eventually we found our way to Sisters, Oregon, and a church in Sisters actually helped us get back up on our feet. Yeah, and then I started going to school in Sisters, Oregon in the 4th grade, and I remember being the new kid. I wasn't from Sisters, and I had this 4th grade teacher named Mr. Warburton. And it's a very weird name, but he was a very good teacher. But a thing that he did outside of school when he wasn't teaching was he was a full-time artist. Yeah, and so he did a lot of art things when we were in class. And he knew about my situation. I think that my mom had told the school, and the school had told him, like, hey, she's coming out of a really rough situation. She might not be on her A game, but yeah, this kid needs some help. And I also wasn't very good at school. I couldn't really read or write all that well. I was not good at math, especially. My light bulb just wasn't on in my brain, I guess. But yeah, so he came up to me and he was like, hey, like, I want to teach you how to do art. Like, I want to pour that into you. And he would, like, show me how to, like, paint and draw really cool things, a lot of nature and stuff like that, and people. And I mean, it wasn't my best work I've ever done, but like
it means a lot.
It meant a lot. And yeah, and then eventually he paid for me and my sisters to go to art school, like art camp in the summers and stuff growing up. And yeah, like it just became like a thing that turned on my light bulb in my head. Like it made my brain start working, and all of a sudden, because I started doing art, my reading started getting better. I could write and I could do math better for some reason. But yeah, so like I credit a lot of that to like when I was 9 years old, and I've kind of been doing it ever since, I guess.
So you're Christian and you do art. How are you able to complement that? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, no, so I would say art is probably one of my biggest forms of worship. Like, I think I grew up always thinking, like, worship was, like, when you go to church and you sing the songs, you know? And I play guitar, but I'm not a very good singer. So for me, I was like, how am I supposed to worship God if I'm not a good singer, you know? So I started doing my art, and in high school, my art teacher, she actually went to my church, and she was the one that proposed to me, like, hey, this can be about Jesus, you know? Like, you can make art about Jesus and nobody can tell you not to. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. So I started doing a lot of work that was about God. I do a lot of hands. If you follow my art account, you'll see that I do a lot of hands. But I started, like, thinking about, like, ways, like, how we could see God, or how I interpreted God. And I never really knew how to draw God's face, I guess. But I was like, I think I can imagine what his hand looks like. It probably looks a lot like ours. So I do a lot of paintings of God's hand, or his people, and like how God interacts with us. And through that, I get to share the gospel, because people are like, whose hand is that? And I'm like, oh, it's God's, or it's Jesus's, or it's the disciples, or it's like a pastor I know, and like stuff like that. Yeah, and I get to share the gospel that way. And I just think, like, I just, like, get in the zone when I paint. And, you know, sometimes I'll listen to Christian music. Sometimes I'll listen to a Christian podcast. And I'll just be painting, and, like, everything else in the world just falls away. And I'm just, like, in his presence, you know. And I get to, like, do paintings of, like, God's creation, like the outdoors and mountains and stuff. And I'm, like, you know, just, like, painting it, like, in awe of, like, wow, God did this, you know.
And that's a big motivation for a lot of Christians. They may be doing art, and they're like, how can I integrate God into what I do?
Yeah, no, seriously, God, like, anything can be a form of worship if you put your heart into it. Yeah, like, if you're an athlete, like, pour God into that. Like, what would Jesus do if he was on that field? I know that's kind of a cheesy saying of, like, what would Jesus do? But yeah, like, find a way to, like, exalt God's name through what you love to do. Because I spend so much time painting, so why not spend time with Jesus while I'm at it, you know? Yeah. That's
so powerful. You were telling me about your paintings. People can find it different coffee shops in town now.
Yes, I can. So Broadway Coffee House, I have 2 there. If you're interested in buying them, or want to know information about me and all that I do, you can go to the baristas, and they have my business cards. And also, I have art hanging up in Ike Box in Salem. My art's going to be there for all of October, and it's also for sale. Yeah, you don't have to buy it. You can just appreciate it. I also sell stickers and prints of my art, too. It's the cheaper version compared to buying the original. And yeah, because so many people have like water bottles and stuff. You just put a sticker on there, and it's like, bam, art everywhere I go.
But they can share the gospel at the same time.
Yeah, no, seriously though, like, I don't know, like, this Christian artist does it, and then people are, oh, I didn't know you were a Christian because of that sticker on your water bottle. So
yeah, I know you mentioned something that happened lately in your life, and you mentioned about the video that you posted, that people were able to see what you were, what you went through last year. And tell me more about that. What was people's response to that?
Yeah. So for people that don't know, so last year, it was a year ago today, I got really sick. My lungs broke. It's the easiest way to explain it, but they just stopped working. I just woke up one day, and I just couldn't breathe. So I went to the hospital, and I ended up staying there for a while. But I ended up having, I was on oxygen support for a while, so I had to use an oxygen tank. And Richi was actually one of the first people I ran into.
I was surprised.
Yeah.
I was like, what happened?
Yeah.
Was that COVID?
Mm-hmm.
What happened?
Yeah, nobody really knows. Like, the doctors were so confused. But I remember the first day I was on campus, I couldn't go to school for like 2 months because of it. I was like bedridden. But yeah, Richie was like one of the first people. Yeah.
Wow.
And like, I remember you didn't ask me like a whole lot of questions. You were like, are you okay? Like, can I pray for you? And everybody was really confused. But that was such a confusing time for me because I'm a healthy person. I've never had health problems before. It just kind of hit me out of nowhere. But yeah, like, I just remember I had to quit my dream job. I was working at a homeless shelter. It's all I've ever wanted to do in my life, like homeless ministry. And I had to quit that job because I physically couldn't go to work. And I had to stop going to school. Like, I worked my butt off to get to Corbin, and I had to stop going to school. And I was just alone in my room, like, having a hard time doing everything. And, like, brushing my teeth was exhausting. Like, it was hard. And I just remember I was going through so much grief and just asking God, like, why is this happening? Like, I'm so confused. Like, I thought I was doing so much good. Why are you allowing this to happen? Like, not that God brought it on me, but he allowed it, and I was just so confused. But to make the time go by, because I was stuck in my room for so long, I just painted and painted and painted. And I just learned that, like, when I painted, all of my anxiety just went away. Like, worrying about the future and all of the whys just, like, slipped away from my mind. Yeah, and I just started to make a lot of paintings that were inspired by that grief that I was experiencing, like grieving the loss of like my job and being able to experience like a normal school year. Yeah, I missed out on a lot of opportunities, and I'm not able to do a lot of things that I used to be able to do as easily, like walking around, hiking. I love hiking, but hiking is so much harder now. But yeah, like all that grief, God was in it with me, and God was just like, dude, just sit with me, but like just paint about it. And I was like, yeah, like I can do that. Like, you know, I don't have to be walking around to paint. Yeah, and I did a lot of paintings. Eventually I got better, and I was able to come back to school with an oxygen tank, and eventually I got off the oxygen. Yeah, and then I started doing some paintings here for the Fusion Art Show at Corbin. Yeah, and I got some awards for those paintings that were inspired by my grief, which was just like so cool, like just getting to like see like how God was starting to use some good that out of that situation. And around that same time, I also started teaching art therapy at Union Gospel Mission for their homeless women and their kids, just wanting to show them like, hey, art can bring healing. You know, like God, like you can like use art and you can like just soothe yourself, like your stress just falls away. Yeah, and like you can paint like this cross and just meditate on like where God is in that. Like I used to like sit with like little kids and like do like hand drawings of like mountains and stuff. And I was like, aren't the mountains like that God created, just aren't they so cool? Like, isn't that insane that God just made that? And like, what about flowers? Like God didn't have to make flowers, but he did, you know? And you just like process that while you're painting it, you know? And it's just like, what the heck, you know? And I had so many cool opportunities to like share the gospel and like just see all that. And it was just such a rich time, honestly, like in my faith, like saying like, wow, if I was never sick, I would have never done this, you know?
So you're telling me that the Lord used that experience in your life to be a blessing for you today?
Yeah, no, seriously. Like, it was such a blessing to bless other people and, like, get to show them how to do art and, like, use it as a form of worship. But, like, it blessed me so much, too. Like, getting to, like, see people, like, just, like, calm down and be like, oh, my gosh, this art is so cool, you know? And, yeah, like, it's just such a cool thing.
You were telling me about you were, like, a mentor for a young lady. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I work at Women at the Well Grace House. Give that account a follow too. Richi's wife works there. Yeah. So Women at the Well Grace House, it's great. So I'm partnered with a lot of other nonprofits because of it. But there's this other nonprofit that I met through it, and the parents, they have a really cool story. But they found out that I did art, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, you're a Christian young artist. Like, we need more of that." They're like, "Our daughter, she's 15. she needs a mentor. Like, she needs to learn how to become as successful as you are. And I was like, oh my gosh, you think I'm successful? That's so cool. But yeah, they asked me to come alongside her and look at her art, and she's so talented. Like, Richi, like, you don't even know. Like, this girl's gonna become big someday. Wow. And she's only 15. Like, she wants to go to art school and everything. But yeah, I just like sit with her, and I like take pictures of her art to help make prints, and I've given her all of the advice I wish I knew when I first started out, and like I made my art account and like my mini business and stuff. But yeah, like this girl's gonna go places, and wow. It's so cool just to get to sit with her and like show her it's like, yeah, this can be a ministry, you know, like you can push forward with it, and you know, like I get to pour into her in that way, which is so cool. And I'm so happy that her parents trusted me to do that too. I get to come into her house and just be like, oh my gosh, your art is so cool. Like God's all over it, you know? Awesome. Yeah, it's just such a cool opportunity.
So you mentioned you were homeless at a time in your life. Then something happened. You couldn't be part of the homeless shelter that you were helping at a time. But then the Lord opened opportunities for you to be a Grace House right now.
Yeah.
How's been your experience so far?
Oh my gosh, Grace House is perfect. I love it. I would stay there forever if I could. Yeah, no, they do such beautiful work. Like, I've partnered or I've worked at and like volunteered at so many different homeless shelters in Oregon, just all around. And Grace House is so different in such a positive way. It's so small, and people, like, you get to be known, and you're not just a number when you're there. Yeah, it's just such a good ministry, and, like, God is all over it. Like, you can just walk into the house, and you can just feel the Holy Spirit hug you when you walk through the doors.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever felt that way when you walk in.
It's really cool. I like the environment, and the fact that it is small, like, you know, you feel part of it. I had the opportunity to serve last weekend on the fundraiser, and it was a cool experience to see the staff working together, but also how people were willing to support. So I think it is a good ministry, and I enjoy being part of it through my wife, Mariah. So.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It's so cool. Yeah, we hope to get bigger someday. Hopefully we can with more donations and everything. But yeah, God's got it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You came to Corbin, let's say 4 years ago, senior year. Tell me more about your experience here so far.
Being around such a tight community where you get to talk about your faith, and like people are so encouraging. Like, I can't imagine what it would be like to go to a bigger school where sometimes people are mean, you know? Like, there are not great things that happen at bigger schools, but being in an environment where it's like, wow, you get to be known. Like, you know, it's such a small school, and like, I remember like walking back and forth from PVG to like class, and I would always see somebody that I recognized. And like, that's just such a reassuring feeling when you live in such a big chaotic world. And like with the opportunities here, like I didn't come here to study art or anything, which that's okay. I mean, I was studying humanities for a while, and then I switched my major like 8 times.
I remember that.
8 times the charm. It's okay to change your major. Just, you know, you're going to pay for it eventually.
I remember that.
But yeah, like here at Corbin, one of my first advisors, out of my many advisors, my first one was Colette Tennant. Shout out to Colette Tennant. She hosts the Fusion Art Show here at Corbin, where she like brings together different forms of art, like photography, poetry, and drawings, all of it. And it's just so cool to get to see everybody on campus. Like, some people have never painted in their life, and they do it for the first time for that art show. And then there's people like me who have been doing it since they're 9 years old, and I show up and I win, but like, it's fine, you know? But yeah, no, it's just such a cool expression for like Christians to come around each other and get to be creative in like a very godly way. Because there's not very godly art out there, or there's not as many Christian artists, I guess. So that's just like such a positive outlet. And then there's the barn too, where you just get to be around other creative people who are Christians.
That's awesome. Just to finish, Grace, what will be your last advice to those people who they may do art or, they're trying to pursue their dreams, what will be your advice to all of them?
Oh, gosh. If you're doing art, no matter how old you are, I think a lot of people do art when they're younger. But then as soon as they graduate school and they get the art classes out of the way, they stop being creative. But honestly, keep on being creative. Whether it's through music or videography or drawing or whatever it is, even if you do sports and you can make up your own sport and your own game, just keep on being creative. That is such a godly thing, and the Holy Spirit is in that, and even if you don't do art, anything can be a ministry. Anything can be a form of worship for God. And I would just like to reiterate that, because anything can be for God. If God made it, you can use it for him. And if you have if you're insecure in your art, I was so insecure in my art for the longest time. Put it out there, show it to people, accept the compliments. It's so hard to accept those. I'm a perfectionist in my art. I can see a million things wrong with my art pieces, but people see it and they're like, oh my gosh, it's so good. And I just have to swallow my pride and just be, yeah, it is good. It's so good, accept those, and, be as confident as God wants you to be in, your creation, the way that God is confident in his creation. I guess that's my only advice.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for watching and listening Stories with Richi.
See you next time.